You are listening to the IoT For All Media Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IoT For All podcast on the IoT For All Media Network. I'm your host, Ryan Chacon, one of the co-creators of IoT For All. Now, before we jump into this episode, please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or join our newsletter at iotforall.com/newsletter to catch all the newest episodes as soon as they come out. Before we get started, if any of you out there are looking to enter the fast-growing and profitable IoT market but don't know where to start, check out our sponsor, Leverage's IoT Solutions Development Platform, which provides everything you need to create turnkey IoT products that you can white label and resell under your own brand. To learn more, go to iotchangeseverything.com. That's iotchangeseverything.com. So, without further ado, please enjoy this episode of the IoT For All podcast. Welcome, guys, to the IoT For All show. Thanks for being here this week.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us, Ryan.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Let's start off by having each of you give a quick introduction about yourself, background, experience, all that kind of stuff, and then we'll dive into it.
Perfect. So my name is Henrik Aagard, CTO at Onomondo. I co-founded it together with our CEO, Michael, 10 years ago in 2012, approximately. I'm a computer scientist of background. And been in the telco industry before also, and just trying to dive into all the technical stuff in telco and IoT.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm the new guy on the block, you could say. I came in about a year's time ago to head up the commercial side of things and really take us from, I would say, a pretty mature product at the time to actually getting out to a broad range of customers. So before that, I spent about 4 years in Bang & Olufsen, a Danish luxury consumer electronics company. So a good journey in tech in a very global role at that point in time. And then about a decade in different ad agencies, digital, strategic, experiential, and had a business of my own at that time as well. So a very different journey from Henrik's, but I guess really representing the IT landscape we see today with a lot of experience players, and then all of the newcomers also accounting for a lot of the growth and new momentum we're experiencing.
Fantastic. So, Henrik, let me ask you, can you talk a little bit more about the company itself, what you all kind of do, your focus and role in IoT, as well as touching on kind of the story behind the founding of the company? What was the opportunity you all saw when you started the company? What was not happening in the market that you felt there was an opportunity to kind of build a company to do, and just kind of anything along those lines?
Yeah, of course. So I guess sort of first and foremost, we come sort of from the technical side of things. We started out from the infrastructure side of things, trying to develop and mature sort of telco intercommunication, you can say. So originally, we actually had the focus on roaming. So within the EU, and also I think globally in general, roaming was sort of an issue 10 years ago. It becomes less and less of an issue from a commercial point of view, at least for sort of consumer-faced subscriptions and stuff like that. But we really tried to target roaming from the technical side of things and wanted to dive into on why roaming was such an issue. Was it just a pure, you can say, commercial play from the operators, or did it also have a technical side to the things? And then we spent quite a few years on diving into that to learn, you can say, telco infrastructure, cellular infrastructure, how networks communicate with each other, how they're not communicating with each other. And then slowly sort of found our way into M2M or IoT, where we really saw, you can say, the benefits of innovation from a technical perspective. Again, sort of the consumer side of things, your iPhones and serving Netflix when you're traveling, that can be pretty much solved from a commercial standpoint of view. But trying to do innovation within IoT and M2M and a few of the things that we really want to touch upon today also needs to be solved from the technical side of things. And that's where I think we come into play, and of course other companies as well, where we try to innovate from the bottom up, trying to fix stuff in the right way instead of trying to, you could say, put patches on top of it to solve the issues. IoT and M2M is such a different place than your iPhone or your Android phone when you're traveling. So this is stuff that needs to be deployed, that needs to live by itself, remote, unattended. A lot of stuff can go wrong. It has to be alive for many years and really have the right foundation for that. that speaks into the technical foundation of what a network needs to be at a global scale. And I think that's what we try to attack, and that's where we come from the infrastructure side of things.
Right.
Applying this, you can say, as an operator today, as a virtual operator today, at a global scale.
Fantastic. So talk a little bit more about, so we've kind of mentioned that the infrastructure approach is kind of, one of the differences, kind of how you guys have come into the market, but just from an offering standpoint and just the general way you are presenting yourself to the market, how is that different than other companies out there that are trying to, provide connectivity and provide a network for the IoT industry specifically?
Well, I think the first approach that we come into when we speak to customers is it's us being the operator. You can say it's us handling everything globally. Without sort of diving too much into the technical aspect right now, we see a lot of solutions in the market where you try to stitch together, you can say, a global footprint. Again, to give you can say, internet connectivity or data connectivity globally. But it really introduces a lot of hurdle, a lot of barriers when you go into IoT, both from a technical aspect, but also from a commercial aspect. Again, when you have large-scale deployments, thousands of devices being deployed, that again has to go on for years. And when we talk to customers who already have deployed IoT devices or have experience with it, they know all the pains that come with, you can say, regular connectivity, regular global roaming SIM cards and stuff like that. This is also where we sort of get a lot of time to talk about our solution, because they really understand the pains. They can understand the solutions that we bring to the table, and we really try to, again, fix it from the bottom up. Really trying to make connectivity quite simple, actually, quite transparent. Even though it sounds, you can say, again, quite simple, but the matter of the fact is that it's really not that simple when you speak to a lot of other, you can say, companies in this realm, where we really try to, you can say, open up the black box, show you what goes on underneath, show you how everything works everywhere globally. That can be in the US, in China, in Europe, everywhere. And really try to speak into the pros and cons there are, with every single aspect of deploying, you can say, globally.
Fantastic. Yeah. Now, either one of you can jump in on this one. I'd like to try to bring it full circle to our audience and talk about any use cases or deployments that you all are involved in, or maybe you focus more on, just to kind of, bring this all the way around for our audience that is maybe kind of learning and better understanding kind of the role you all play in the IoT landscape. And so if you all could touch on kind of any use cases that you're excited about or that you have been going on to just kind of show the power of the offering.
Yeah. So where you could say we really have a stronghold, and what we find highly interesting about how IoT is developing is the notion of the global aspect. So global deployments and running and deploying global fleets. And also add to that, then the mobility and the movement of assets. That's really the hardest thing to fix. We see some MNOs that have a strong and well-built local or national foothold, but really the problems for IoT and hence the interesting challenges start as soon as we cross borders and as soon as we go outside of the POCs and the struggle becomes real with scaling, and we actually see that real business impact in front of us. So that's what we've been focusing on a lot. And that's what, on the back of what Henrik just explained, these 730 deep network integrations we've done all over the world from brand level and then up really comes into play, offering a range of interesting upsides, benefits, or completely new ads for the customers today and the range of customers we are in dialogue with present day.
Fantastic. So when you all were kind of bringing this to market, or I guess even just lately, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've kind of come across in building this network, providing this network to the world, to come, IoT companies to be able to utilize? What are some of the things that you've come across and noticed that were the biggest challenges, and maybe how you kind of overcame them to kind of get to where you are now?
I think it's definitely explaining what we do and how we do it differently. Almost also like you asked, maybe we sound a bit like everybody else, saying we're global. We can name hundreds of networks, etc.
Sure.
But then it's when we actually dive into, you can say, each and every single aspect of the sort of the solution, that's where we sort of really are able to explain how we're different. And I can give a few examples just
Great.
to So one thing again is speaking into, you can say, the networks that we have, 700 plus something. A lot of other companies have 500, 700, 800, etc. For us, of course, it's a matter of saying that we're global. Yes, that's fair enough. It's important for us to say also that in every single network, it's our own core running things. So that's sort of an initial point. So if you're in the US, if you're in China, if you're in Europe, it is us handling everything that goes on in the network. And no data is exchanged through a third party, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a very sort of deep foundation to build innovation upon, saying that it's us controlling everything.
And let me ask you, let me jump in and can you expand on that a little bit and talk a little bit more on why that's so important?
Just from an example point of view, again, speaking into sort of the EYCC or the eSIM that we're seeing being mentioned quite a bit. That is sort of stitching, you can say, a lot of agreements together to give a global footprint and maybe also to give a commercial benefit in some countries or regions. Maybe also to overcome, you can say, permanent roaming issues. But it's more about, you can say, stitching a lot of agreements together, switching between those depending on where you are in the world. Going from the bottom up instead, you can say, having made integration, having to put a few technical items into it, having our own packet gateway, et cetera, in every single network that we have, being able to select packet gateways depending on if it's in the US, in China, or in Europe, et cetera, gives us a lot of advantage and benefits. It can give us the benefit of being able to be permanently in, you can say, in China, as well as in the US, as well as in Europe on the same profile. Again, it's sort of this one network mentality. Again, if you're a customer that already have been sort of deploying IoT and try to run a big fleet globally, you'll know all the hurdle there is to, you can say, switching between profiles, the constraint it puts on both the devices, the commercial aspect of having multiple subscriptions running for the same physical SIM, you can say. Just clearing that up, making sort of a clean slate, a clean network, is really what we try to do at a global scale. And that's sort of where, when we mention all the networks, we actually means that you get the benefit of all the networks. Other stuff also to touch upon, again, is going to maybe others, mentioning, again, 700 networks. In many cases, you're gonna find out that there are sort of preferences on the SIM, just as an example again, to select, you can say, based on commercial agreements, the cheapest network for you. And that really doesn't benefit sort of the quality of service. It really doesn't benefit of you having multiple networks in a country if the device always keeps trying to attach to the same preferred network. Clearing that up, you can say, not from the infrastructure side of things, but from the SIM side of things, allowing you to, or your radio module, to choose just the best network there is in that specific area, also adds on to the value of having these multiple networks, both globally, but also surely, you can say, specifically in one country. And this is things that we see with customers when they actually test it out. If they have experience with it, they really understand it. But when they test it out, that it really changes stuff for them. Again, it's just a much more seamless experience for them than they're used to. Again, speaking into quality of service and really speaking into opening up, you can say, what's under the hood, to allow them also to put or stitch together, you can say, their preferences depending on their device, their project, their customers, etc.
Fantastic. Now, when you talk with customers and you work with customers, is it kind of like a one-size-fits-all approach, or how do you tailor the offering to different customers, different use cases, different, within different industries, different, scale sizes? Like, how do you kind of tailor the offering to fit those organizations or those individual use cases to help them be efficient on the cost side?
I think first and foremost, we don't come with sort of the regular subscription plans and a one-size-fits-all model. This is also one of the first things where we are maybe a bit different. We try to put it in terms of sort of a network marketplace, meaning that when you come to us, we're not going to give you sort of a global price or a European price or a US price. We're actually going to show you all the agreements that we have and all the prices that we have for each and every single network. And then it's actually up for you. You can say together with us, of course, we are happy to assist, but it's up to you to choose how you are prioritizing price versus quality versus coverage versus et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
And this is something that you can do on your own, also after deployment. Again, opening up the hood, you can say, providing all the tools for you to just handle this yourself without having to speak to us. So if you want to go into the US and you want to have all the networks in the US because of quality of service, that is up for you to choose. If you just want to have the cheapest price, you can select the network with the cheapest price. Again, that's sort of up to you. We have this model where we actually don't earn money on the data. So we are really actually focusing on also lowering, you can say, the data consumption, which might sound a bit odd. But we strongly believe that will benefit, you can say, the greater good for IoT projects at a large scale. This is a volume game for us also, but not for earning money on the data, but really trying to get devices out there in the field and doing whatever they're good at on collecting data and transmitting that back to the cloud. And whatever we can help with in that sense, that's sort of our place to be.
Yeah, and this is really one for the notion of transparency. Again, there's nothing we would love more than to help in all modesty to try and reframe the discussion a little away from like what's the price of a megabyte, which is very much a tele legacy, towards seeing this as a tech space as it is today, and then much more talking about automated solutions, nothing about inactivity or active SIMs, nothing like that. You pay simply if a SIM transfers data and adds value to your business, and that's it, period. It should be IoT first and not, colored by the tele legacy here.
Makes total sense. Now, when you all work with customers, are you working more directly with customers that are deploying solutions themselves for their company or their clients, or are you all working more with ecosystem partners to bring the connectivity in to the solution and make it available? And the reason I ask that is because a lot of times it's always interesting to learn where IoT adopters start their IoT journey. So do they start it by looking for a full-scale solution? Do they start it looking for hardware? Do they start it looking for connectivity? They all started, or maybe even started by looking into the cloud. So when you all work with most customers, how does that usually start? Is that something that they're coming directly to you with? Or are you working to build or build partnerships with other ecosystem companies so that when they adopt a certain full-scale solution, your connectivity is the one that it's already coming with? Like, how do you usually handle that? Or is it kind of a mix across the board?
Yeah, I would say we do both. The explanation for that is simply the difference in time. So we have these partner dialogues going, the OEM dialogue, and that takes quite a bit of time, as everybody listening to your great show here, Ryan, will know. And then on the other hand, we're working quite a lot directly. With anything ranging from SMVs up to the really large ones as Maersk, where we the Danish shipping and logistics company, where we're the ones making sure that the reefers refrigerated containers will be tracked and live accessible all over the world, carrying corona vaccines these days. So really, it's a matter of catering to both, because what we've tried to do from the beginning is say, if you were to only deploy with one vendor globally, and low practically meaning one SIM baked in from the beginning, that's what we've built this for. That's what it should be like, in our opinion, completely removing the need for forecasting what kind of SIMs for what coverage do you need, where, with what agreements. You should be deploying on one thing, no matter if you're an SMV or you're a huge OEM manufacturer. And really, we're seeing a lot of positive feedback on that in the market space. So it will just be a matter of time before we then seeing that materializes on both sides of the line you rightfully draw up here.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. I love the approach you guys are taking. I appreciate all the information and kind of the background, kind of on how this got started and why you all are different. Because there are a lot of different players in the market that are trying to do something similar, but I think the approach you all are taking is fantastic from the way you're describing it. So I wanted to break away from kind of these conversations and talk a little bit more high level for a second before we wrap up. So talk to me a little bit about the current landscape for cellular connectivity and IoT. It's something that is widely talked about, about, but maybe never really broken down to our audience in detail, kind of what the landscape really looks like. We have NB-IoT we hear a lot about, we have LTE-M we hear a lot about. So can you talk a little bit about how you all view the landscape, and then taking NB-IoT and LTE-M, what are they exactly to somebody who's maybe unfamiliar, and kind of what are their benefits?
Yeah, so I think cellular connectivity, especially sort of for IoT, first and foremost, it really makes sense. You can say it's global, it's globally deployed, it's standardized. Okay. I think there's a lot of sort of interesting and great technology out there, speaking into LoRa, Sigfox, other technologies as well. But I really and strongly believe in that cellular just had the sheer benefit of being globally deployed. You can't take that away from it. Then you have, of course, the technologies, 2G, 3G, 4G, NB-IoT and LTE-M or Cat-M1 being part of 4G. We also try to actually explain this in a blog post we have to really for customers to read up upon it. But I think both technologies really have sort of their, of course, it makes sense, their unique or their strong appearance into IoT and M2M. I think not diving into sort of the technical aspects, but because those are quite different, but I think you've actually taken the good part from 2G and then sort of optimized it towards IoT. You focused on, you can say, battery power consumption for devices. Okay. You've optimized on how many devices can be attached to a base station, et cetera, et cetera. So you've sort of taken old technology. 2G is still a phenomenal technology for IoT actually, but we are seeing it being sunset in many places. It's going to be replaced. NB-IoT and Cat-M1 are easier and less expensive to run for operators as well. So that's definitely sort of the future. Both NB-IoT and LTE-M or Cat-M1 has been accepted as part of the 6G stack, meaning that now you get sort of a certification that this is going to run for 20 plus years. That's also very nice to know when you deploy stuff that needs to sit there for 5, 7, 10, 15 years. So this is sort of, this is technologies that are here to stay. Then there's the whole sort of NB-IoT versus LTE-M, which in many cases can sound a bit like religion, and also from operators what they've deployed the first, to be honest. Okay. I think our point of view, also us acting as an MVNO, we rent access in the radio access networks. In that sense, we don't care too much about what technology, as long as it's available and whatever fits the purpose. But just also to put a few words on it, we actually think or we're seeing that, okay, NB-IoT was quite fast out there. I think it was sort of also to have sort of competition towards, again, LoRa, Sigfox and other technologies that attack sort of battery power consumption, penetration, coverage. We saw NB-IoT massively being rolled out a few years ago. But then we're honestly seeing LTE-M really catching up. It's being heavily deployed globally, first sort of in Europe and in the US, the western part of the world, but heavily being rolled out globally now. We see a lot of the benefits that came from NB-IoT is also present in LTE-M. So you have the battery power consumption, you have the penetration or coverage, but then you also have all the features that regular cellular really serves or brings to you. So roaming or wholesale integration, that's already present today in LTE-M, handover between base station, etc. All that without compromising, also serving sort of static, small, cheap IoT devices that needs to stay within one specific country. So from the looks of it, at this point of stage, of course, things can change. We really see LTE-M really gaining traction and really taking the lead into what is being mostly deployed, just because of the sheer fact that it has all the benefits from regular cellular connectivity that we've seen in NB-IoT is slightly lacking.
And then maybe an add-on from commercial side to that would be that one thing is, of course, talking a lot into the technologies like Henrik is doing here. And certainly we are meeting NB-IoT versus LTE-M, if not every day, then several times a week in our dialogues. So I'm happy you bring it up, Ryan. But really, one of the things we would love to hear people asking more is, what about future-proofing? And future-proofing, what is that? And really the answer will be that you're able to choose and switch between vendors and what you chose later on in your deployment life. So let's just normally we try and say, look, 15 years back, to try and look 15 years ahead and look how much happened. And we didn't even have cloud 5 years ago, right? So how are you going to plan just 5 years ahead now? And one of the things that strikes us a little weird in the IT space today is the legacy, again, from Tele, where you're not allowed to switch your deployed SIMs between vendors for most. We haven't met anybody else than ourselves so far in the marketplace, at least allowing to do so post-deployment. But it's been technically possible to do so since 2003. So that would be a great thing to look out for. So except for just networks, but looking out for actually being able to change in deployed SIMs deployed devices, and also asking a bit more into, we have this triangle of IoT ecosystems, device, connectivity, cloud. How about putting a bit more responsibility on the connectivity side and a little less on hardware that's so strained and so tested over the course of its lifetime, and then looking at what could connectivity take up from that? How about putting a bit of smart into the network that you can control OTA and update when you get smarter and when new technology happens, because that's a certain fact we need to live with, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a great point you bring up, talking about future-proofing and kind of the capabilities of connectivity that maybe we're not really exploring and how they can contribute to the overall success of an IoT solution at any level. So no, I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's not something we really talk too much about. So that, that's fantastic. And that kind of sort of ties into my last question here, which is, in IoT, we've seen, and I think you all have seen this too, especially when it comes to connectivity, there seems to be a lack of transparency in the industry at times. It's probably across all different components in different companies, and it's slowly getting better. But in your opinion, where does the transparency kind of need to get to in order to make it more beneficial? How do you all approach it? What are the problems you're kind of seeing? Like, for instance, cost and the pricing of solutions can be very confusing, and it's not very transparent for a company that's looking to get to scale for a deployment. So it's hard for them to kind of predict out costs. So just talk to me a little bit about how you all kind of have viewed the lack of transparency in the industry and kind of what you're doing to combat that, and where you think as an industry we need to get to in order to help increase adoption. Yeah,
but I think there's two sides to that, sort of both technically and then commercially, and I can definitely sort of touch upon the technical, and I'm pretty sure Anders can speak a bit about the commercial part of it. Okay. I think one of the first things that we really try to attack is, again, opening up the black box. I mean, I think telco for many, many years has been surrounded by this big black magic box that was rocket science to run, and therefore also fair to price very high. And I think price, again, commercially, but price has really been a barrier to use cellular for IoT, or at least for large-scale IoT, you can say. And I think one of the finest jobs that we can have is actually opening that up, again, being transparent about it, what is actually going on under the hood. It's not rocket science. It's complex, no doubt, but it's not rocket science. You can deploy stuff today using fantastic cloud vendors for hosting, etc. You can do interconnects into radio access networks, which is standardized by GSMA or underlying parties, you can say. Opening that up and showing that to customers and really explaining this is what happens from A to C. This is all the way out on the SIM that speaks to a radio module, that speaks to the base station, going into the core, and going onwards onto, you can say, your cloud. Opening that up to the customer without trying to hide stuff under the hood, that seems to be quite beneficial for the customers a lot of the time, even though they maybe not fully understand what's going on in the nitty-gritty stuff. They suddenly realize what goes on when my SIM is in the US or in China. And that really helps a lot. And this is also the way for us to be able to explain the cost elements there is to an IoT solution. Again, Anders briefly mentioned, you can say, the commercial model of subscription plans, which is, in my opinion, at least one of the big headaches for cellular IoT, that you sort of inherited the subscription plans that you have on your iPhone. So that puts a lot of constraint on how you're manufacturing your devices, when you need to activate or provision your SIMs, etc. Removing all that from the equation of IoT is really makes it much, much more simple to work with cellular connectivity. Again, opening up the hood and saying, okay, for us, an active SIM in the network, provision SIM in the network, that's just a row in a database. It doesn't cost us anything today in 2021. So it's not going to cost the customer anything. But on the contrary, it really helps the customer again, manufacturing their devices, putting on the shelf or ship the devices to whatever part of the world that they need to be deployed in. End of life of devices becomes much more simple, so you don't have all these creep costs that I think cellular connectivity in many cases, unfortunately, have going for them. So here you just know whenever my device sends data, whenever it brings value, I'm going to pay for that. We have a cost. You're going to put a cost on the radio access network. There's a cost on the core that we're running. But if it's not transmitting any data, then there's no cost, period. It's not like you have to use it within 3 months or 6 months. It automatically activates itself, and then you have the creep cost coming. We actually ship SIM cards or SIM chips activated or provisioned. So it's just much easier to use, and really, in that sense, also remove a bit of the telco part of the connectivity, you can say, and just becomes connectivity or tech connectivity in that sense. So that's sort of opening up the hood, and then there's the whole realm of the commercial model of, again, showing the customer what sort of the network's cost and what's associated with that.
Yeah, and I mean, I as I mentioned briefly in the beginning, I came in from consumer electronics, and you have an industry there. If you take televisions as an example, that's living off of finding new innovations every year, and there aren't any big innovations necessarily every year. So you had the curved screen, that wasn't a thing. Then you had the 3D screen, that didn't become a thing. Then you go to Berlin for the next big show, and you're told that 8K is the new thing, but you don't have any content. So, that just keeps on building. And now coming into Taylor, let's call it tech these days, I'm kind of seeing a bit of the same, that there's some big marketing machinery out there that's really good at setting an agenda that might be nurturing some questions that aren't necessarily the questions that people should be asking. And I can see why they're a little confused. And we're a little player coming in here trying to say, hey, how about viewing things a little differently? And, how credible is that towards huge marketing engines? But I think that's why we keep coming back to transparency. Keep asking questions, keep asking why. Why? And typically, when you ask five times in a row, you ask why, you got to get a pretty good idea of, what's that person on the other side. I don't want to save the table, but the screen these days, what have they really got to offer? And make sure you deeply understand what's the technical solution you're buying into. What is that going to look like in the future? And make sure you understand pricing. Pricing is not about what's the cost of a megabyte. Maybe it was in the noughts and in the 90s, but it's certainly not anymore, and is specifically so for IoT. So make sure you understand these things out there. And we see that the really technically capable people, that can be in the SMBs or it can be in the large enterprises, they understand this. And we can have some really enlightened dialogues. But for the newcomers or the less technically savvy, that's more focused on the impact they want to do in the world with their business, that there's some big pitfalls. So we believe a lot in knowledge sharing here, and on that note, we highly appreciate what you guys have going on with your show ever since having coming on with Rob Tiffany from Ericsson. What a guy! And back in October 2020, we've been following this steady on, and we truly believe that sharing knowledge the way you do, opening up, being truly transparent, that's what's gonna tackle this 75% fail rate we see across IT in general head on. And that's what we need to do together here. This is about the impact of the world, the impact on our businesses, and the impact of the end customers end of day.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We totally agree with all of those points, and the fact that the education component is probably leading to a lot of the issues we're seeing in the industry, and any type of hesitation that comes with adopting IoT as well. We set out to do that back in 2016 when we started, which is let's start helping educate the market in the world, even especially talking to those who may not be as technical to understand all the different components of an IoT solution, just the overall value of what IoT can do for their business to help bring grow adoption to those numbers we were kind of promised by all the analysts, and we're starting to see grow now. So now I appreciate your guys' time. I wanted to finish up here and just ask, on the company side, any news or exciting things coming out that we should be on the lookout for? What does the future kind of look like for the company? And then if anyone out there is interested in contacting and learning more, how can they do that?
I think there's definitely two things that we're working on right now that we can share. One of the things is on the SIM side of the stuff. So we're actually working on a software-based SIM. I know you can say a lot of companies are speaking of it, but from our point of view, one of the biggest headache is to actually sell hardware. You can say the SIM chip or the plastic SIM today. So we really want to put that on, you can say, devices as a pure software play. Also because, again, opening up the box, you can say for us, the SIM is just credentials, or not just, but it's credentials to the network and nothing more. Everything else is handled by the radio module and whatever logic is on their device. Of course, that should be just software. And today, all radio modules is perfectly capable of running so. So we are in the works of launching, you can say, a soft SIM, a pure software play for the SIM. And then I think even more interesting, one of our big beliefs is that the whole IoT space is about connecting devices to clouds and not devices to the internet. And we want as a network to actually become an active part in that. Today, you put a lot of responsibility onto the devices when you speak to the clouds. Again, that could be IBM, Azure, AWS, Google, etc. As Anders mentioned, 5 years ago, these clouds didn't exist. And now you're actually putting, you can say, a lot of software, a lot of responsibility onto every single IoT device to speak to these clouds. And then you deploy these for, again, 3, 5, 7, 10, 15 years. And a lot of stuff is going to change on the cloud side of things. And instead of just having the network be just a data play or a data highway, we actually think that from an architectural perspective, that the network should really play a part in connecting the device to the cloud. And this is what we are heavily working on. Recently, we just launched the IBM SIM together with IBM, where we've actually made, or you can say extended, the IBM Watson IoT into the cellular network, just to having the devices as simple as possible. And for whatever is needed on the cloud side of things, for updating security, for updating all the stuff the next many years, we can do that from the network side of things and just have the IoT devices as simple as possible, which is very beneficial in our minds when you deploy, again, IoT. And that goes into future-proofing it for whatever comes to the cloud. It goes for data consumption. It goes for battery power. And this we're also working on with our other cloud vendors to be launched in the near future.
Fantastic. And for our audience members out there who would like to follow up with any questions, what's the best way to contact the company or reach out?
Yeah, well, there'll be two ways. One is on our website, of course, onomondo.com, or via LinkedIn, which we've found to be an amazing place for the global IoT community to interact, engage, and share knowledge. So we try and put a lot of good content out there, and we'll love any dialogue incoming. Certainly, we have a curious team standing by for any incoming dialogue, depending on the nature of that. So please hit us up. We'd be curious to pick up dialogue with anyone out there.
Fantastic. Well, I thank you both for your time. It's been a fantastic conversation. It's been great to have you, and thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Ryan.
And thanks
for having us. Thanks for a good show.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Thanks again for joining us this week on the IoT For All podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please leave us a rating or review and be sure to subscribe to our podcast on whichever platform you're listening to us on. Also, if you have a guest you'd like to see on the show, please drop us a note at ryan@iotforall.com and we'll do everything we can to get them as a featured guest. Other than that, thanks again for listening and we'll see you next time.